School Board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and if you'll join us in the flag salute with Laurel Crossman. Moving to number 2, adoption of the agenda as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to number 3, superintendent reports for information only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Wilkie and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Thanks to everyone for coming out on a stormy evening. It's great to be surrounded by such great-looking young people, and we would like to introduce some of them to you tonight. We would first like to invite Chief Dan Ingram from Carson High School to come forward, and he'll introduce the NJROTC orienteering team. So welcome, everyone.
Good evening, school board. I'm Chief Ingram. This is the NJROTC.
Chief, I want to give you a microphone.
Thank you. Speak right. Okay, again, good evening. I'm Chief Ingram. I'm with the Carson High School's NJROTC. It's Naval Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. The young people standing in front of you are the orienteering team. Instead of me explaining everything to you, I'm going to let the captain, Kyle Navarro, go ahead and take over.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, I wanted to thank you all for your support for the orienteering team, providing us transportation to and from our meets. But first, let me ask, does anybody not know what orienteering is? So orienteering is land navigation based off of map and compass only. So it's a timed competition where you're competing against other individuals, try to get the fastest time. And so we average about 25 meets per year, and all these meets qualify us with our area manager, who then sends us to our national competition. And this year we were down in Agua Dulce, and we placed 3rd overall and 3rd varsity and 5th on our JV team. And we have a few of our cadets up here with medals too, placed individually. Riley Dunn here placed 4th overall, Chris Paluch over here placed 5th overall, and Briar Fancher placed 9th overall. Just want to introduce that to you. So thank you very much, appreciate it. You guys have any questions?
Questions from the board? You don't get to use Google Maps, I take it.
No, we do not.
You know, I just want, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was asking my sons about it because they're friends with Kyle Holloway, who's not here. Do you run, is it a 5K course that you run while you orientate or around that? So you make up your own course? How do you do that?
So there's different levels of courses. There's ranging from white to blue in difficulty, and those vary in length. So there's we have it broken up into a freshman, JV, and a varsity level. And so there's a course provided for you on your map in a straight line, but the straight line isn't necessarily the best route sometimes, depending on the terrain there is. So you do have to choose your own route to get where you're going. And the courses can vary anywhere from 3 kilometers to, say, 7 kilometers. So 1.5 miles, anywhere to 4 to 5 miles. Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, I just wanted to say, I mean, the opportunities you guys and girls get are amazing, and it really is some real-life skills. I'm a civil engineer now. When I was younger, I was in the Army, and we spent a lot of time on land navigation, reading maps, living by compass. And at the time, I never realized what good that would do unless I, was late to lunch. But now my career is reading maps and doing all that stuff. So, I mean, what you're learning is really a great lifelong skill in a lot of different professions. So good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. So what comes next? So next, the next season started for us already, actually. So the national competition is over, and we're already training and preparing for the next one next year. So we're going to start going to meets again soon, and we'll go through the fall and through the spring, and then hopefully qualify for the national competition next year. And we're hoping to do even better than we did this year.
Well, Congratulations and thank you for representing Carson High and Carson City so well. We appreciate it.
Okay, they're actually being really modest. There was over 500 runners at the competition, over 30 schools, and all of them were up in the top 20%, every single one of our cadets. So most of their competition levels had over 100 runners in each one of their levels. So to be in the top 20, they're really doing well. Also, he didn't mention it, but we all belong to the Orienteering USA, which has its own total nation, not just NJROTC. And both Riley Dunn and Kyle Navarro have been invited to represent the Bay Area Orienteering Club, and that's who the whole team belongs to. And so they're going to go and represent Bay Area Orienteering plus Carson High School at this April 13th. And they'll be competing in Quantico, Virginia, and running with Bay Area Orienteering Club. And that's another one of those competitions that we'd like to get to at our next year's competition. So,
Yeah, you left out just a few details there, Kyle.
yeah.
Force to have it.
No, they're just modest.
Thank you, guys.
Madam President, members of the board, next I would like to invite Carson High School's cheer team to come forward. They recently participated in a national event, and our spirit leader, Sheila Story, is here to introduce her squad. Welcome.
And I missed the announcement before, but if there's parents and you want pictures of their faces, you can come behind us. Feel free.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. This is the Carson High varsity cheer team, and this is also our competitive team. I'm going to have each girl and gentleman introduce themselves, and then we have a few of our seniors who are going to speak and kind of go through the process of what we went through to make it to nationals.
I'm Quinton Matson.
I'm Jade Chan.
I'm Isabel Limbro.
I'm Melanie Sepulveda.
I'm Tiana Calloway.
I'm Sadie Jesse.
I'm Brianna Murray.
Oh.
I'm Emily Yeager.
Alicia Singleton.
I'm Isabel Ebro.
I'm Eddie DeLeon.
I'm Andrew Morris.
I'm Audrey Cook.
I'm Hayden Brighter.
Josie Steineke.
Shelby Friel.
Lexi Ambro.
Tara Wright. Liberty Hofling. Berkeley Emerald. Robin Steineke.
So I came on the team as a senior, first year of cheer, didn't know what to do, or don't know what I was doing. So after football season ended, I came on the team. And from cheer to football, you gotta have a lot more skill, you gotta have a lot more muscle, and just gotta be strong enough to lift up those girls.
Okay. Our routine started with the cheer, and then it went into elite stunt sequence, which was a switch up. And then we did jumps, which consisted of 4 jumps. And then we went on to another stunt sequence, which was inversions to extension, twist Superman. And then we did a dance. And then we did the pyramid to end.
So I actually wasn't on the team all competition season. I only came on for nationals, and I actually had to learn the routine the week that we left for nationals. And so I actually didn't learn the dance till that Wednesday, and we left on Thursday. And so most of the routine I didn't know until the day we competed.
So, a big part of being on the competition team is having commitment. And I'm just thankful that our team does have commitment, because without it, we wouldn't have made third in the nation. So, that's awesome. Do you want me to go first?
All right, so just to talk a little bit about what went into preparing for competitions. It's not just the hair, the makeup, getting dressed or whatever, but it takes a lot of time. I mean, you have to, like Sadie was saying, you have to be very dedicated. And if you don't show up to practices, we have to be very adaptable and put people in different stunt pods and be able to work with each other. So we had to have a lot of teamwork to make this team work. And we also had to be able to comprehend choreography very quickly, because our choreographers will only come for like a day or a week. And yeah, we just had to be able to work hard and listen to our coach to make sure that everything works out.
In order to make it to nationals, we had to qualify first. And how we qualified is on January 12th, we went to regionals, which was at Deer Valley High School in California. And you had to score a 75 or better to qualify for nationals. So we scored a 92. And we actually came in second in our division, because the first place winners was El Cap, and El Cap had won first place in nationals the year before, so we only came in 3 points behind them. And yeah, they won nationals last year, so we did pretty good.
And this year. And this year.
And this year.
So this year was, of course, always trying in regards to athletes who got injured, athletes who were unable to maintain their grades, athletes who partaked in behaviors that were not becoming of them. So we did lose 3 athletes from February 1st all the way to the week of performance. So Liz and I always tell our team is you have to be flexible and adaptable, and you have to be ready for change at any time. And this team truly had to go through a lot of changes and a lot of pain and suffering. I would like to point out a couple things. We as a team had to bring up some of our freshmen to help fill in some of the spots that we lost. And one of our flyers, Tara Wright, she learned all the elite stunts in 4 days to learn everything for us to help out. And also Melanie Sepulveda, we brought her up, who wasn't on the competition team, but came up to help us out because we lost 2 of our flyers due to injuries and such. So, it's one of those things where you have to work hard, you have to dig deep, and you have to work through the pain and long hours. We had to be in the gym at 6:30 in the morning over Christmas break because we couldn't have the gym because basketball got it. So we are always the ones who come in, set up the mats, and we'll take any time we can in that big gym to pull out all of the 9 mats to truly have a full floor to learn the competition routine. So I think they did a wonderful job. We had a great trip, of course, not without stress, but that's part of the process. When we got to LA, we did have to have 3 extra practices. So we were in the hotel, practicing until about 9 o'clock at night. But it all came together, and they all really worked very hard as a team. So both Liz Hickson and I, the coach and I, are very proud of them, and they did an awesome job. Do you guys have any questions for the athletes or myself?
How many teams were you competing against?
We originally were against 19 teams, and then what they did is, because it was such a large division, they divided it into half, and then they took 45% of those 19 teams. So that's how we made it to the finals. So we went against some really large teams from California with like 8 or 9 gentlemen on their team, and who are just really well-rounded athletes. I think this year the big difference is, number 1, we competed in our right category, and number 2, we brought on gentlemen onto the team, which then allowed us to do more elite stunts and more co-ed stunting. Co-ed stunting gives you those big points. So not all cheer teams are are fortunate to have gentlemen on their team, but this year we were able to bring on men and be able to do those elite stunts.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you, Sheila. How long have you been coaching the cheerleaders?
You know, I've been the head coach since 2014. Of course, I started when my daughter was in high school. They asked me to help out, so I helped out and that type of thing. But then I came the coach in 2014. This is our 4th time to nationals, and this is our first time making it to the final round and placing.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for all of your efforts. Besides managing all the health care of our district, you find the time to work a ton of extra hours. We appreciate it.
So I'm going to pick one cheerleader, and I'm going to ask them to tell them about our biggest fundraiser of the year, which is this Friday. So, okay, so let's see here. Eddie, come here. I'll pick on you, buddy. You tell them about Mr. Carson High, okay?
Okay. So Mr. Carson High is this Friday. So if you guys want to buy tickets, buy them from me. Our tickets are around like $10 and our VIP is 25. 20. I'm not trying to scam you. It's basically like a male beauty pageant. It's like really cool. I'll be in it next year. But our Quinton, our cheerleader, is also going to be in it. And it's actually really cool. It's like one of the best events, like Carson High, is what I would say. And it's such a great way to end the senior year. And all the money goes to our cheer camp. And it's pretty great.
Where is it?
Oh, it's in the community. Oh, it's here. At 6:30 p.m.
And
at Friday.
And where do we purchase the tickets? Where? So just
Carson
call
High.
you? Just call you there?
Yes. Or you can buy them at the door.
And I'd have to concur. I finally got to check off being a judge at Mr. Carson High last year, and it was like one of the highlights of my career since I am an alumni of Carson High. So it's a really good time, fun to watch you guys have a lot of fun, and everybody dresses up so nice at the end. So everybody should go. It's a good time.
And this year, Mr. Varner is our school board member who will be judging along with
Yeah.
Good job.
Looking forward to it.
So does anybody want to give a plug for fall cheer registration?
Fall cheer registration has started. You have to go on to register my athlete. Register up
Oh,
there
sorry.
and get your, Fall cheer registration has begun. Anyone interested in fall cheer has to go on to registermyathlete.com and register and get a physical and fill out the health history form. And then our first parent meeting is April 1st, which we go over everything regarding tryouts and what is expected of a cheerleader. And then our tryouts will begin May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
I just wanted to make a comment, right, the person you launch in the air, they're the Flyers, obviously. You're crazy. No, honestly, it's so much fun to watch, and when you see a talented team, obviously there's a lot of trust. I mean, if to do stunts like that, you talk about teammates and trusting your teammates, but this is truly a sport that, the whole team needs to work together, they need to be dedicated, and, the trust level is just, I don't think you could ask, honestly, for more trust. So, good for you. It's nice to hear about the cohesion and the teamwork. We kind of live in at times in a society where teamwork is missing. And so it's nice to see that. So congratulations.
Congratulations. And Sheila, thank you again for your dedication.
I couldn't write fast enough, so I gotta get them to announce that one.
Look at you.
Madam President, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go on to Casey at Pioneer.
Hello there. The announcement for Pioneer High School this week are congratulations to Ms. Steinkraus for earning a CCSD mini grant for Science and Art Focus. Friday, March 1st was National Speed and Debate Day. Jordan Mix represented Pioneer High School at our state legislature. Listened to a presentation from Assembly Majority Leader Teresa Bentias Thompson and sat in on the session. There is a JAG legislative field trip on March 20th. Pioneer High School wants to give a warm welcome to Ms. Calderon, our new long-term sub for the Carson Online Lab. Congratulations to Cherish Crayon and Cassidy Linkfelter for setting up the first Pioneer's first volleyball club. The HOSA Student Leadership Contest is March 17th through 20th. Today, the ACT was administered. March 12th at Pioneer High School. Great job, students, on putting forth a strong effort for this important test. We had 100% attendance. There is a project discovery trip to Squaw Valley tomorrow, March 13th. On March 14th, Pioneer High School's art student Anahi Pacheco will be honored at the Nevada Museum of Art award ceremony. On March 22nd, there is a field trip to Mesa Rim Climbing Center. There's no school on Friday, March 15th, and Monday, March 18th. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Casey. Ryan from Carson High.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Ryan Lawler. I'm the school board representative for Carson High School. Today at Carson High School and for the rest of Nevada juniors was the ACT, a highly anticipated event all year. A pretty good day if you're not a junior, but it was long and hard, but most students got through it and it was pretty easy. All of the teachers at Carson High School really helped prepare the students. Our English, math, and science teachers did a great job for all of us. And I know everybody was kind of complaining yesterday and this morning, but we're all happy to get it done, and we're all happy to improve our scores and get ready for our future. Also, right after the ACT today, Carson High School put on a career and college readiness course and fair for all the students, and that was really good to help get people thinking about their future. Also, Friday and Monday, there's no school, as previously stated, and Friday is, of course, Mr. Carson High School, which is really highly anticipated for all the student body. They weren't really joking. It is a really good event, and the whole student body in the community, it's a really good event for everybody. Also, softball, baseball, swim, and golf started, and the senior prom for Carson High School is Saturday, April 27th.
Thank you, Ryan. Board reports. Laurel?
For Fritsch Elementary School, they had last week their Dr. Seuss celebration last Thursday with green eggs and ham and breakfast for dinner. And they'd like to thank all the families who came out. It looked like a really fun, great event. And also they'd like to remind all the parents to make time to stop by and check out the Lost and Found that has grown a lot. I went looking for my son's lunchbox that was lost and found one of his classmates' lunchboxes that I returned to him. And then the next week, somehow his other lunchbox came back. I don't know. It wasn't in the Lost and Found, but karma works out. So sometimes just go to the Lost and Found, even if you don't know anything's missing, because you might find that they have left stuff that you didn't know was lost. And do it before too long, because they are going to take everything and donate it so that it's not cluttering the whole hallway. For Fremont Elementary School, they had a very successful reading week last week. They had news anchors, NHP, UNR Cheer, Reno Aces, as well as the governor come and read to the kids. And they also wanted us to check out their Google site for FF News. It's all caps, because a lot of students uploaded videos that they put together for reading week there. And they also wanted to remind all the parents that elementary parent-teacher conferences are coming up March 26th and March 27th. And for NASB, we had our part 3 of orientation last weekend, and it was good to see everybody there. And now we get a break from orientations for a little while. So hopefully, if you've done all of those plus the November, you should have completed all of the training required by statute for your first and third year of board membership. So.
Except November doesn't count. It starts January 1st.
Oh, it starts January. Okay.
But
So
you
did
should
we
have
get it all?
almost all of them, and then the last ones you can get in November. But I'm pretty
Okay.
sure you're pretty
pretty close.
Like you maybe
'cause
be
it's
a half
6
a credit
hours
short.
and yeah, you're getting there. So, okay. Anyway, that concludes my report.
Okay, I have Board Rep Bray. They'd like you to know they had a very successful STEM night. They had 126 students who attended along, that doesn't count the family members that were there also. Also in attendance, Governor Sisolak was there with the First Lady, and he was very engaged. He posed for pictures with the kids and the family members. And then he went to every STEM station and engaged the students and asked about their activities. And he stayed there a long, long time, and the First Lady actually gave out fortune cookies to all the kids. So it was a very enjoyable event, and it was very well attended. They also had a very fun and successful reading week. They'd set a goal for the kids to read in 1 week, 24,901 minutes. And the kids actually read 36,808 minutes. So they surpassed the goal by quite a bit, and I thought they did a great job. And they had a lot of fun. They had dress-up days and et cetera. So they had a really good time. They'll also be participating in Choir Palooza on March 21st, which is held at 7 p.m. at Carson High School. Last week, they also had their jump rope demonstration, and it was 45 minutes of non-stop jump rope action. And those kids have more energy than you can imagine. They just went and went and went. It was very enjoyable. A lot of great pictures that Mr. Catherine was able to take, and I think some of them will be shared with you guys. They did a really great job. And Miss Sharp and Mrs. Castaneda, they actually volunteer their time to do this jump rope club. And the jump rope club runs from October through February. And it's they have it a couple times a week in the mornings. And I would like to mention that Miss Sharp has actually conducted this jump rope club for 15 years. And it's all on her own time. And so I'd like to really thank her. So that was a great event. At Carson Middle School on the 13th, which I believe is tomorrow, they're having their Bring a Hero to Lunch event. And what that event is the kids get to invite someone they look up to, whether a family member or someone else, to come to school and have lunch with them. So that'll be tomorrow. And then they also have their Gold Award at 11 o'clock in the library. And what that event is throughout the quarter, the teachers nominate different kids who are consistently good students or somebody who showed a lot of improvement. And they bring them in and they feed them pizza. And then they also get a certificate for in and out. So they're looking forward to that. And then on the 16th of March, they're having the wrestling tournament in Lovelock. It's an all-day event. And on the 19th, they're having a PTA meeting at 3:30 in the library. Then on the 20th, they have their coffee with counselors' parent meeting. That's at 8 a.m. in the library. And then on that same date, the 6th and 7th graders have their dance, and that's at 2:30 in the library. So I know the 6th graders and 7th graders are looking forward to that. And that's my report. Oh, I would like to mention one other thing if I could. This week, March 11th through the 14th, is Children in the Legislative Week. And I was able to attend an event yesterday, and there was 3 students from Carson Middle School, not Carson Middle School, but Carson Montessori School, who testified before a legislative committee, and they were advocating for the adoption of neon to be the state symbol. And these 3 young children, I call them children, but they're young men and women, they did a really good job. They testified before the committee. It was a full committee. And there was 45 people in the audience, and they spoke without being nervous, and they had their lines down, and they did a very good job. So I think the future's in good hands with some of these kids.
So I am reporting for Mark Twain. So last week, they celebrated Dr. Seuss also, Dr. Seuss' birthday, with a different activity each day that focused on reading. They held a dress-up week, and each day they did an activity that highlighted a book. And my favorite theme for the dress-up week was the places you go. In the places you will go, all students and staff wore college attire to promote the college that the students were going to attend or are going to attend in the future. So I thought that was pretty cool. For the week, they held a door decor contest as a Dr. Seuss theme, and the sky is the limit was the theme. So a very positive week. This week, they are doing the cognitive abilities testing And March 14, the fifth graders will visit the legislature in the morning. And in the afternoon, they will be meeting with the Carson Middle School team to discuss the sixth grade and orientation and class selection. On the same day, the third graders will be visiting NDOT. And March 21st, choir participates in Choir Palazzo. On March 22nd, fifth grade visits Carson Middle School in the morning. And during the week of March 25th, they will have a book fair. On the same day, the PTO will have a bingo night. And on March 26 and 27, student-led conferences and a PPT parent conferences. And that concludes my report.
Well, first off, I wanted to apologize for those taking attendance. I missed the last two meetings. I let Mr. Stokes know. But while I was gone, I was in New York and Florida, and I had a chance to visit several schools. And just keeping it short, it was interesting. We talked a little bit about AP, Jumpstart, those kinds of things, and just getting a sense of how receptive these schools are to it. And really, both programs are in good shape. The schools were very receptive. My daughter's interested in a few, and had some nice, candid conversations about what they accept, what they don't accept, and it. I'm noticing that a lot of these schools, more and more of the AP classes are being accepted, the Jumpstart classes are being accepted, and I think these kids who are on those two paths are in good hands. So I wasn't back there just eating pizza and cannolis. I actually did something productive. Which you did bring back. Yeah, I kind of did. They're right here. And then recently, we just had the Carson High Talent Show, and I just wanted to just congratulate everybody that was involved in the talent show. I mean, we have some amazing students with some fantastic talent. I mean, these kids that were playing piano and singing and dancing and doing all that stuff. It was a really entertaining show, and I just, I didn't get a chance to mention it before, and I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed it. Regarding Jumpstart, anyone who's interested, tomorrow at 7:45 a.m. in the library, if you're interested in Jumpstart, you have to take what's called the Next Gen test in reading and writing. And if you're interested, passes are available at the guidance office. United States Military Academy is going to be on campus Thursday, the 14th. And what they're going to be talking about is careers in the military that also allow you to go to college. So anyway, Thursday in the Career Center, and it's during lunch. And then College Week starts next week, and that's going to be during the lunch hours. It goes all next week in Senator Square, and representatives from WNC, UNR, and several other schools are going to be on campus to meet with students and answer any questions that they might have. So anybody interested, whether or not those are schools you're interested in going, it's always helpful to talk to these folks, because you'll find that what you're learning from one school applies to another school you might be interested in. So take the opportunity to do that, and that completes my report.
Couple quick announcements from Al Seeliger Elementary School. A week from tomorrow, Wednesday, March 20th at 7:45 in the morning, right before school starts, there'll be a PTO meeting in the library. Also, on March 22nd, Friday, at 1:30, the fifth grade DARE graduation. Also wanted to mention a couple wonderful music events coming up. It was mentioned earlier, Choir Palooza will be Thursday, March 21st, next week, and then followed the following Thursday with Bandorama on March 28th. They're both in the Carson High School gym, and if anyone doesn't know what those are, every musician from Voice and Choir Palooza, from bands and Bandorama, every musician in the district from elementary school through high school are in one spot. And that's something that's great living in Carson City because of our size, our proximity to each other. We're one of the few districts that can pull something like this off. Also, wanted to mention right now, it's been going on about 35 minutes. The Carson Orchestra, which is a combination of high school as well as middle school strings players, Just started at 7 p.m. tonight in the community center, directed by Dr. Fox. And that's my report.
I believe it was last week, I had the opportunity to attend the chili bingo night at Carson Middle School, and it kind of took me way back a few years, and saw Mr. Stokes speedily judging chili, trying to keep his mouth from overheating, Trustee Carini running around with tubs of hot dogs, and it just seemed like a great event, so good job to Carson Middle School.
I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Bean for being named Nevada's 2019 ACT K through 12 champion for her efforts for encouraging performance on the ACTs. The Carson Sheriff's Department and Carson High PTA are getting together March 26th at 5:30 in Senator Square to do a drug education workshop. So you can hit there and then come to our meeting. Wouldn't want you to miss ours. And Eagle Valley Middle School's in the middle of their penny wars. The teachers were on top Monday, but they've dropped down to last place now. And just to let you know, they're still looking for judges for senior projects for Carson High. It's going to be the second Monday in April as a judging. And then I was lucky enough to be able to walk through the new construction at Pioneer last Friday, and it's looking really good. And unfortunately, I won't be able to make the next bond committee meeting, which is on Friday at 11:30. But if you have a chance, you should go. It turned out really nice. It almost looks like a college campus. So we're really excited about it. I think you'll be real impressed. So, and thank everybody that worked on that project. Moving on, association reports.
Okay. Get situated here. Good evening, Madam President, trustees, administration, and Renee. CESA would just like to thank Dan Davis and Dr. Delphin for putting the Progressive Discipline Procedure Manual on the district website as per our negotiated contract. And anyone interested in reading the manual can go to the department section and scroll to the Progressive Discipline. And this is where you can find out levels 1s, 2, 3s, and some examples on what you need to look for and how you may be reprimanded or written up. So it's really interesting, and I did read it, so hopefully I never have to go there for that. So I'd like to read a letter from our President Terry. As you know, we're in restructuring our job descriptions. Let me find it. And this is basically for our members who voted on the contract, just to give them a little more heads up on what's going on. And it says, as members of CESA are aware, they voted to ratify and approve this agreement in June 2018, and the association and Carson City School District negotiated a 4-year contract. We received a 2% raise in years 1, 3, and 4. We are currently in and completing year 1 of our current negotiated contract. In year 2, meaning 2019-20 school year, we are to look at restructuring job descriptions for many of the job families, such as the secretarial family, to streamline the numerous positions into more clearly defined job titles and descriptions. Along with the restructure of job titles comes the likelihood of reclassification, depending on the ability to include as many job families as we can within the 2% CCSD gave us to negotiate with. In order to accomplish all this, the negotiations teams agreed to suspend all requests for reclassification until such time as this process is completed. Please rest assured that your hard work and efforts are not being disregarded. The district is well aware that all job families needed to be reviewed for restructure and reclassification. This is a work in process, and your patience is sought as we work to thoroughly complete this part of the negotiated agreement. Thanks for all your understanding, Terry Cantley, President of CESA. So we just wanted to get that out there. I know we had some reclassification come across us recently, and so we just wanted to let them know that we have not forgot about you, but we've had our second meeting, and we got our work cut out for us. So that's that. Our next restructuring meeting will be April 11th, As stated before, we ask administrator, principals, and supervisors to please be mindful and watch out that you are not asking the ESPs to work outside their job descriptions at this time, as we are working on streamlining the job descriptions. We hope in doing this, we can limit the number of reclassifications in the future. I would hope if anyone needs clarification on duties that they try to issue out, that they will get in touch with Human Resources and discuss any changes. And right now, our sites are voting on ESP Employee of the Year, and I know at my site, we've already named ours. The awards banquet will take place in May at the Fandango Casino, and we will let you know the time and date when that happens. And I think that concludes what I need to let you all know. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to number 6, public comment. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matter within the authority of this board. Please note that the public comment may be taken on items marked for possible action before action is taken on such items, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at that time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such a matter until the matter is placed on an agenda for action at a meeting. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the podium, state their name, and limit their comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, moving on to number 7, designation of Riff Silva and Company LLC as the independent audit firm for fiscal year 2019 in the amount not to exceed $68,000 as budgeted as required by NRS 354.624 for possible action. Mr. Fueling.
Good evening. Good evening, trustees. AJ Fueling for the record. Each year, every school district in the state of Nevada is required to designate an auditor for the upcoming, or that will complete work on the external audit for the current fiscal year. Work that doesn't usually begin until August or September, except for some initial work in June early on. This company, Rife Silva, has been our auditor for the past 6 years. And we've been very satisfied with their services. They're familiar with the other smaller or medium-sized districts that are all around us. They represent or provide services to Douglas, Lyon, and Churchill currently. They have provided a letter explaining the services that they do provide us. This includes make sure that we meet all the government auditing standards. They review our internal controls, that we meet all levels of compliance to the federal and state governments. They prepare financial statements and lays out what our obligations as a district are to support the audit. One of the things I want to bring to your attention, in the initial letter that Mr. Dave Silva sent out to us, there was a fee attached of $68,000. I spoke with him soon thereafter and was explaining more so issues that are going to come up in item number 8 regarding concerns of financial concerns, budget concerns in the near future, and talked to him to ask if he would be able to potentially help us with that cost this year. So you should all have a copy of the revised cost letter that includes the cost for the coming year. So that $68,000 number comes down to $63,000. So instead of a 4% increase, he's offered a 4% decrease for the year. Just nice. in the spirit of, I was probably talking his ear off too much, and but it is most appreciated, certainly. So anyway, I don't really have too much more to say about that. I don't know if there's any questions. Otherwise, it's an action of the board.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none.
Just express our appreciation to Mr. Silva and his firm
Sure.
for
Will do.
that consideration, especially given the budget uncertainties this year.
And I'll just point out too, and I usually say this each year, the auditor we had prior to Mr. Silva, the last year, I think we paid $93,000 for services. So through that RFP process where he was found, it certainly has been beneficial financially in strange terms. So
When are we supposed to go out for RFP again with the auditors?
it's really, there's no requirement that we need to for these types of services.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the Carson City School Board of Trustees approve the audit firm of Rife Silva and Company LLC as the auditors for fiscal year 2019 for a contract amount not to exceed $63,000.
Motion by Don, second by Laurel. Any other discussion on the moment or the motion? Any discussion from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And again, thank them very much for us. We do appreciate it, and they do great work, and it's nice to have the same auditor working with our staff, and they seem to work really well together, so we're thankful for that. Moving on to number 8, presentation and discussion of tentative budget scenarios and assumptions for the Carson City School District for fiscal year 2019-2020 for discussion only. Mr. Fueling.
Thank you again, trustees. AJ Fueling for the record. So over the past weeks since the last board meeting, there have been a flurry of meetings regarding the topic of funding in the state of Nevada amongst the other CFOs, amongst superintendents, sometimes both. And it has been a bit of a frustrating discussion for all of us because of the lack of information that we have to work with at this time. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of the things that we have learned, as much weight as we can put on those, and then take you through a little more formal of a budget assumption presentation, just based on updated, all the best numbers we have, given what we've been encouraged to consider as a budget number and what that looks like. So in meetings that have occurred between some of the legislators in the districts, we've learned some more. However, you have to remember that this is coming from legislators, not the legislature. It hasn't been a decision on their part. But what we have learned, or what I guess we were told, is that districts in this next biennium will likely still be funded on the old Nevada plan model. That isn't necessarily good or bad by itself, but there's some concerns with what has changed with that model over the past number of years. What they're going to do, and actually I have these two items out of order, so I apologize. Once they have the old model in place with numbers for the new biennium, they apparently plan to run the new model concurrently so they can see what the impact is between the different districts over the 2 years. And that will give them a better gauge of what potential pitfalls or issues that they need to deal with if they want to fully implement that model. But clearly it has been made to us that new model is the goal that is going to happen. The intent is not to have any districts harmed in the process, but that is a very generic statement because when we always talk about hold harmless, what that means can vary greatly. It can mean a lot of different things. And especially when some of the impacts could be so severe for some districts. So again, there would be some type of hold harmless, we believe, in there, but we don't know exactly what that would look like. And so what we were encouraged to do for the current or this coming school year at this point is to use the per pupil amount that we currently are situated at, which is $7,198 per pupil. And again, this is coming from some legislators, not the legislature. So it's as much as we would take that, I do know some other districts are going to be going along with that, but there's still some uncertainty there, I think, for us. But it seems to be the direction that we need to go because we need to make a choice at some point. And are there any questions about any of that? Okay. So we're still very, very actively trying to understand this new model and just understand what's happening at the state, what's happening with funding. One of the surprising things that we have come across that has confused us maybe more, but I think is worthwhile pointing out because it makes me want to go back to some prior years to look at some of this information. And I'm sorry that some of the font is rather small, but I think you'll understand what I'm trying to get at without seeing too much of the writing. So on the left, you have the blue, which represents the average statewide per pupil in Nevada for the current year, which is $5,967 per pupil. This then, the NDE presented the governor's budget about a month ago, I believe, to the legislature. And in there, when they present that to the legislature, they make a very detailed presentation on here's all the things that we are adding into the budget for the new year, and here's what they're going to cost. And so when they went through that process, they included here's what is being included for expected roll-ups, and roll-ups just being kind of steps taken on salary schedules, the expected impact of that. And we converted that to a per pupil amount. So what that total dollar amount was, we backed it down into a per pupil amount so we could add it on to the current year's per pupil. And then they presented what the governor's promised 3% increase would cost. And so we converted that into a per pupil, and that's in the gray. And then there was a 3.8% overall increase for the state expected for health insurance. So there was a specific dollar amount there as well that we converted to a per pupil amount statewide and added in. And what's interesting about that is when you look at what the current year is and you add those three things in, which were very clearly presented as what those numbers would be, it doesn't seem to add up to the number on the right. The number on the right is what's in the governor's budget presented as the statewide average per pupil for fiscal 20. And that fiscal 20 number is supposed to include the value of that benefit increase, that 3% COLA increase, and the cost of roll-ups. So it doesn't quite make sense to us. And we're going to be further looking into that, but it just quite doesn't quite make sense. It'll be interesting because we'll be looking back at prior years to see if this has actually been happening for a while. It's almost as if they really started the budget from a deficit to what was paid this year, which is kind of concerning. So just another point of confusion in the world that we are living in. Any questions on that? Okay.
Did anybody ask him why the difference?
Not yet. This has been kind of a rather new thing that's come up in Discovery. So the CFOs have been kind of talking about this now, and we'll see where that goes. So some of this is going to be similar to last time. Some of it is a little different, but what I really want to encourage you to ask questions, and usually you're great about asking questions. Don't worry about stopping me during the presentation. Please do, because there's a lot of implications with some of these things. Four things I really want you to keep in mind as you're kind of sifting through this information is that there's a timeline for the budget approval process and submissions we have to do, and I'll lay that out here on the next slide. And I need you to, as you're going through this, to think about your level of comfort with three things. So first, the projections for enrollment, because I don't have them being the same as this year. Your comfort level with the per pupil guarantee amount, because I'm using a solid number here that potentially we could run with, so we could build a budget off it. And then your comfort with the bottom line. So after you add back in all the expenses, given those revenues, here's the bottom line, and how does that feel? And so I'll be really looking for some feedback and discussion, and ultimately any direction you can give, so as we get this process started. So budget timeline. The last important piece that we need, and I have this number projected myself, but we get official projections from taxation for the government services tax, local school support tax, and the ad valorem property tax, which is actually the most important one to us, kind of in that equation, because we receive most of a good chunk of that money. On April 9th, you will have the tentative budget presented to you here. And just as a reminder, and for our new board members, that tentative budget is a statutory requirement, but it is only for discussion and for your input, feedback on it. It is not for approval at that point. On the 15th of April, I have to submit that tentative budget. Whatever you do say about it, if you tell me to burn it, I still have to submit it to the Department of Taxation. Then at this point, on May 28th, we are planning on having the board meeting budget hearing. One of the requirements that changed for us, it used to be that the budget hearing had to be on the third Wednesday of the month of May. You now actually have, it's basically the last 2 weeks of May. At some point, you have to have it. And what many districts are doing is they're holding it during a regular board meeting. They're just making it an agenda item on their board meeting. So if you'd like to get a night of your life back from a board-related obligation, this would be a good opportunity for that. But at that point, the budget is for approval. So on June 8th, then what they call the original final budget is due to the state. If on the 28th the budget wasn't approved, we would have to hold a special meeting soon thereafter to get an approved budget. So again, there's a chance for it to be revised, but that becomes a really tight time frame, and we've talked about that a little bit. So just so you're aware that is a possibility.
So usually our May meetings have awards. We usually do retirement and Teachers of the Year, Classified of the Year. Is that different?
Madam President, this year, the awards for our Employees of the Year, I believe, is on the 26th of April. And then we will recognize we have a night that we usually recognize our distinguished students. And we've learned that from past years, we want to have that separate from our retirees so that there's more room in this facility to seat everyone who wants to attend. So we have those three things broken out, but we can likely use that last meeting in May for a budget hearing.
And then, once you have approved the budget and we've gone through all this, then we hopefully will find out how much money we actually have coming from the state. Right, right. So it is a frustrating process for all districts, but this is the way it's been for quite some time. Okay. So this is my favorite quote related to a lot of things, but it is very true for budget, and I can't get enough of it. Donald Rumsfeld, who is the Secretary of Defense under George Bush, and I believe Gerald Ford too, actually in the short time he was there many years earlier. There are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know we don't know. And that, I guess, sums up maybe life in a lot of different ways. But particularly, it seems some of these biennium budget years when the legislature is in session. So the unknown, I would say at this point, is the legislative session, and not that we do know it is going on and we know some of the things happening, but the concern of something coming out of right field that wasn't on the radar is always a concern. And considering the level or the lack of communication regarding some of the funding items, this is of great concern this year. So some of the known unknowns, we're still going to, again, receive from the Department of Taxation revenue projections coming up soon. We know there will be a per pupil amount. We just don't know what it's going to be yet. So we're going to be looking or waiting for that. Again, the current year per pupil amount for Carson City School District is $7,198. Enrollment, and I'll show you a little bit of that. Class size reduction, still, we don't expect that to go away. We can hope to continue beyond this alternative plan if it is offered, which there's the regular plan or this alternative ELCO plan as it's known. Under the standard class size reduction plan, it holds requirements for class sizes only in first, second, and third grade. And Washoe and Clark both do that, and I think maybe one or two other really small rurals do that. But what it does is then forces extremely small class sizes in those grades, but then in the elementary schools, your fourth and fifth grades explode. They have some really large sizes. In the alternative model, you have a slightly higher class size requirement ratio allowed in first, second, and third, but then you're also held to a fourth grade and fifth grade ratio. So that's a little different for us. Most of the rurals take advantage of that. I wish they would let Clark and Washoe do that, but they haven't because I think it makes a lot more sense.
AJ, when you say fourth and fifth and the first model explodes, what are typical class sizes they're
So,
talking about?
Ms. Schema, do you know?
As a former building principal, when we had class size reduction to 16-1 for first grade, 16-1 for second grade, 19-1 for third grade. And then we had teaming at the time, so sometimes that was like 32-2, that sort of thing. But there were times that my fourth and fifth grade were around 30, 31, 32.
And I would say too, I think on the Nevada, I don't know if it's a Nevada report card, I found something once that showed average class sizes. And I think for Washoe and Clark, they were generally in the upper 20s, if not the low 30 range in some cases, but generally it was upper 20s, what we saw.
And don't we get like every quarter in our board report or board packets, like under consent agenda, don't we have a report that comes out from Judy and Bill? From finance? Fiscal?
We have.
Susan Kima, for the record, we have a quarterly class size reduction report that you get that comes out of my office. Gina Hines puts that together for us. That shows whether we're over the plan allotment that we chose, which is the alternative plan, 22-1 up through third grade and 25-1 for fourth and fifth.
And then last, special ed funding. So we're still, while I take a guess at it here, a reasonable guess, I think, we still don't know what that's going to look like. And so known knowns, not truly known, but the rest of the budget assumptions that we have in building this. So again, I showed these numbers last time, but kind of cleaned it up a little bit. So what expected headcount is last year and this year, and then from that, the average daily enrollment estimate. So we're looking at an increase of a little over 50 kids based on average daily enrollment for next year. That is based upon historical birth rates. It's based upon historical trends of what was called survival from one grade to the next throughout the district. So it's not, I mean, a projection is a projection, but it's considered a pretty reasonable way to try to figure out what your enrollment will be the next year. So with all the developments still going on in the city, I think it's a reasonable number at this point.
Sorry, one more. Speaking of the city, the growth, have you talked to Lee Plummel, or are we kind of tracking, in a manner that he was expecting, or are the trends a little different than what the early projections were in terms of new development?
I think it's moving along generally how they're expecting. At the Bond Oversight Committee meeting in February, Hope Sullivan from the city came to present what's been happening with developments in the city, and they're moving. It's happening, but it seems to be that it's been within what they expect. That there hasn't been any big one that has come up that is shovel ready to go or anything like that. So I think we're still in a good place. And the enrollment projection study that we had done actually it included basically every development that was on their map. So I think we're in pretty good shape for that. So this is the enrollment history that I have right now. So the blue at the top is elementary numbers, the red at the bottom is middle school numbers, and the green in the middle is high school numbers. So the middle schools, if you don't know, they're pretty full right now, at least especially Carson Middle School. So that seems reasonable. But you have some smaller elementary level grades that are coming through. So eventually at the middle school level, things will ease a little bit from the pressures that they're seeing. But then those larger middle school classes make their way up to high school. So you start seeing a bump in the high school numbers. And again, these are projections, and there's a lot of variables that can impact this. But given historical trends, this is kind of what we're seeing. The numbers generally fall in line with what that projection was. They have a little more growth at the elementary level, and I think a little more growth at the middle school level than what I have. I still need to take some time kind of reconciling between the two. But again, I think it's generally, at least for next year, it should be reasonably close to that. So other revenue assumptions, special education aid. So for next year, $4,300. In past years, it's gone up about $200,000 to $250,000 a year. So I think going to $4,300 is a reasonably conservative number to use in projecting for special ed next year. One thing to point out, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but within the general fund, what will always represent that there's some loss to charter schools, around $400,000 a year that we lose in DSA funding that goes to charter schools. For special education, there's kind of a weird, the way that the state looks at us for special education is they almost consider Carson Montessori kind of part of us. So when they calculate out our allocation, it's based on a per pupil, but they actually include Carson Montessori's numbers there. So then we're kind of the agent, the fiscal agent that gets it to them. So it really is money that they are due, but it's just strange that it comes to us first and goes to them because there's no other aid that the state gives us that they do that with. So just something to point out. Class size reduction, we'd expect some increase. If anything, the number of teachers would probably be about the same. It's gone down slightly the last number of years that are considered class size reduction teachers, but it's based on the average compensation a teacher receives in the state, and that should go up. So we'd expect at least some increase for class size reduction funding. There are other revenue increases. So based on preliminary projections, government services tax will go up about $240,000. That's good because that's money that we actually get to keep. Ad valorem taxes, my projections right now, I have about a $550,000 increase, which we get to keep about 2/3 of that outside of our Nevada plan funding. So that's significant for us as well. Local school support tax up $1.8 million, but that is completely taken by the state, so it doesn't really help us out all that much. Other revenues I have increasing at 1% conservatively across the board. The revenue losses to charters are about $387,000 projected. Any questions so far? Okay. General fund staffing, so I revised the number I had from last time because I didn't have the entire PERS rate increase reflected in there. So looking at a total about $2.2 million increase. The cost of steps that all staff receive if they are not topped out on the schedule, the cost of a 2% increase, the cost of PERS not only going up because of salary increases, but then also the PERS rate increasing from 28 to 29.25%. And then health insurance, we have a 5% increase for the next year. Non-staffing costs, at this point, the budget includes a 2% increase to all operating budgets. We have the Cops and Schools grant, which is $230,000, and we have the technology replacement schedule, which is set to be at just over $1 million next year. And so when you bring those revenues and expenditures together, you can see the budget for the current year. We have about a $3 million deficit that was projected, not including contingency funds and not including carry forward funds at that time. So based on otherwise regular operations, about a $3 million deficit. In the new year, based on about 1 million more in revenue. And so that 1 million more in revenue comes from some enrollment growth. It comes from increased government services tax revenue. It comes from increased property tax revenue for the most part, and then some other additions. So altogether, it's about a $1 million increase. But because of otherwise increased costs on the board related to staffing and non-staffing, that expenditure number goes up to $71 million and tentatively shows about a $4.7 million deficit. So that is, by using the current year per pupil number, that is significantly better than the $9 million deficit number we looked at last time. However, it's still a large number. And just for perspective, given what our projected fund balance will be at the end of this year, that sort of deficit could be maintained for about 2 years. And at that point, you would be below that 4% threshold where you start getting watched by the state, and they have in history gone into districts and essentially taken over. That happened to White Pine about 20 years ago. So given all that, again, I guess any comments on what if you're comfortable with looking at enrollment projection or assuming an enrollment increase for the new year. Again, I don't think it seems entirely unreasonable, but given circumstances, maybe you're not comfortable with that. The fact that this is building off the current year's per pupil number, which it was encouraged to us to do. Other districts are doing it, but there's still a level of uncertainty with that. And then ultimately that bottom line deficit number. So I guess for me, there is a fiscal health concern really in the near term because of the numbers that we're looking at. As far as what we have been doing, I mean, this discussion has been going on some time. We have had many days of budget meetings to talk about possible ways to reduce that deficit. That actively continues, still looking in different corners, trying to find ways or efficiencies that potentially would help the cause. So with that, if there are any more questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, really just looking for your thoughts in any direction for me in beginning to really build this budget. Ultimately, I need a revenue number to work with. So again, I'll try to, I can kind of facilitate the conversation a little bit, but whatever you could do, I would be good.
Okay, we'll start with Mike and then we'll go down the line.
So when you look at the instructional technology component for $1 million, so what does that include? And I'm thinking it might be a good idea to kind of slow a roll, you know what I mean? And maybe have a little bit more gradual. I'd much rather extend that than look at some of the more bleak possibilities we have to look at.
Sure. So the technology replacement schedule includes that $1 million is, I believe it's a little over $500,000 in Chromebooks. So that is used to purchase new Chromebooks for 6th grade and 9th grade each year. And the assumption is that those kids will get those devices in those grades and carry them with them through the rest of their schooling. And then they would cycle down to the elementary level after that. When we initially looked at this, we were hoping to be able to purchase new devices for the elementary level as well, kind of in a similar cycle. But it was clear at that point, even under what we thought were better funding conditions, that was not going to be sustainable in the long run. The rest of it is replacing smart boards in buildings. So Raymond Maderos, the IT director, his team went through and inventoried really every piece of technology in the district, and has been just a great help in trying to guide schools as to ways that they can replace technology. And some of those smart boards are almost 2 decades old now. And so, it's great when you get all these things on grants early on, but ultimately later down the road, the general fund has to pick it up. So it's replacing a number for each school at this point. At least each elementary, it's that there'd be 5 replaced per year. And most of the ones in the schools are more than 10 years old. So it's really about that time. And the idea was that within about a 6-year period, we could probably replace almost every smart board in the district. It includes laptops for teachers. So we're getting to that point where a lot of the desktop setups need to be replaced. And because of the nature of what instruction has become, and because of folks wanting to have technology at home, laptops are now replacing a lot of those devices. So that has been something that I think we have 6 of the schools over the past 3 years that have received new laptops, and they're ones that work well with these new digital displays. So it's kind of been something we've been trying to do together if we can. There's some audio enhancement systems and some document cameras that are in there as well. I think those are all the major items, though.
And what are some of the other deficit reduction options you've looked at?
So, as far as, at least from a non-staffing standpoint, It's been really going through each department's budget and trying to figure out what items are kind of mission critical or non-negotiable. So for example, looking at operations has a really large budget, but $1 million of it is utilities. And so there's really, we've, knowing Mark Hornick, we've squeezed about everything we can out of that turnip, and I don't think we're going to get too much more in the near future. But then for the items that are not, or that are considered non-negotiable, are negotiable, looking at a blanket reduction of budgets across the district for that, schools and departments. There have been discussions beyond that for looking at potentially at staffing considerations. Some of the numbers are so large, it would be hard not to have those conversations.
I'm in agreement with Mike. I mean, the 1 million for technology upgrades, I'm all for them. I think they're really important. I know Ron and I, when Ron was on the board, we pushed for those, and they aren't, that's something we have to keep doing. But if there's a way to take a deep breath and roll them out a little slower, that, my opinion is we're going to have to look, if it truly is, it gets that dire, we're going to have to look at staffing. But I kind of agree with you, is we got to look at, what do we need to operate at mission critical, and everything above that, we need to be looking at. Because once we start cutting staff, whatever that becomes, it all affects the classroom. But if we start getting too high a classroom ratios and those kinds of things, it's going to have that direct input on student performance. And so I'd probably like, because I've been gone for the last month, I'd probably like to come in and just get caught up and chat with you if you have some time, and go from there. So I don't want to waste too much time tonight going over that. But that's kind of my thought. So I'll defer my comments until I get a chance to catch up with you.
And if that is very, very generous of you. I want to talk a little bit about the technology, just because of technology. Sorry, I had a little bit of a conversation with Mr. Medeiros about it, and he has some concerns, and we were really focusing more on the Chromebook side of things. He has some concerns if that schedule pauses or is reduced in some way, that there could be some implications down the line that may be hard to get things back on track. And those devices are only supported by Google for so long. So that is just something that we'd have to consider. But what we didn't talk about were like the kind of smart board replacement digital displays. We didn't talk about laptops and things like that. And we can kind of look at, are there any possibilities to maybe extend the life of those, for sure.
And I would just say, hearing that, I think our first priority has to be to protect our staff as much as possible. And so if things get difficult on the technology side, that's something we might have to weather, just because of the fact that I'd rather, save our jobs than make sure people are getting laptops, honestly.
I'd like to thank you for the work you've done, all of you, on the budget. I'd have to say, you ask if we're comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with the $4.7 million deficit. I'm not comfortable with, for lack of a better term, kicking the can down the road. I think that we've got to really look at where we can cut back. And I guess my question would be, you mentioned about cutting the departments across the board. To bring the budget more into balance, what percentage of cut would each department have to take to at least reduce the budget, say, deficit in half?
So if you wanted to completely avoid the discussion of staffing, you'd have to cut every budget including all of those kind of non-negotiable items like utilities and such by 50%.
By 50%?
50%.
And I had one other question. As you know, the governor recommended that the teachers get a 3% pay hike also. Was that taken into consideration if that does pass in the budget numbers you presented us tonight?
So the budget I presented tonight includes what is currently in our negotiated agreements, which are 2% increases. We haven't, I haven't taken the time yet to look at what the additional impact of that would be.
There may be an impact though, right? If it's approved?
Yeah, and it's,
it's not funded.
And it's kind of a weird thing how it's funded. Sometimes it ends up going into our DSA, sometimes it ends up going straight to, straight line teachers. It's just, we don't know yet. That's one of the unknowns that he talked about. We just don't know how that's gonna just look like.
and one of that question in some way came up at the legislature from our Senator Ben Kiefer, who, when this was brought up, he said, so how exactly, when this happens, how exactly do we make sure that 3% goes to the teachers? Because, I mean, what he was trying to get to is that the legislature really doesn't have the ability to dictate if it just goes into the regular DSA pot, how that money gets allocated. So I think there's still some more to learn about that.
Just the technology, my concern with the Chromebook replacement is that so many of the high school, particularly at the secondary level, a lot of their classes and the new textbook adoptions are online only. And we'd be putting kids' achievement at risk if we don't keep those up where they're functioning. I mean, my kids have several classes where there is no textbook. Everything is online. And so that to me is more of a priority than the smart boards. And sorry to say, teacher laptops, just because the kids need to be able to do their work. I don't know if we ever look at a bring your own device type situation, or if that is too far out to look into for the next year, but I don't know, we just need to make sure that the kids have access to the materials that we've provided, that we've adopted new curriculum, and it's that way.
And when I think about that, the computers we have purchased aren't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
How we utilize them going forward just might need to be altered. So, I mean, I think there's that consideration. I think that you're right. Teachers need laptops. I mean, to do their job, they need access to that type of technology. But I think that, I'm not saying we do away with all technology, because even that wouldn't solve it. I mean, I think we're going to have to look at strategically how we're placing our staff members. We're going to have to look at technology. We're going to have to look at our budgets. But we're going to have to look at something. But I think that the last resort should be laying off staff members as much as we can avoid it.
And then just, AJ, also if you could give us more information when it comes back about where our ending fund balance is, because I know we're higher than statutorily required, and where would we be? And then was it just last year that we had a projected deficit, and then we ended up not having a deficit because we had vacancies that weren't filled and other things. So I'd like to see more of that to know where we're possibly going to end up.
Sure, I can certainly bring that to you. As I best remember at this point, I believe the ending fund balance after this year is budgeted to be around 12 to $13 million in that range. And I'm sorry, I forget there was something else you just said I was going to say.
Let us know if we're expecting how this budget's ending up.
Yeah.
If we're going to have
Oh,
any,
yeah,
if we're going to
sorry.
have some
So-
vacancies or some other things that
Yeah.
maybe don't end up using it all.
And you're asking about some history. So in the prior, in fiscal 17, 16, 15, we ended up each year with over a $1 million surplus at the end of the year. Last year, we ended up with about a $50,000 deficit. But in each of those years, one of the primary factors was there was a lot of savings from vacancies that happened each year. Last year, when I budgeted, and like this year, we really took that into account when setting the budget, that you're not going to reach that full cost because of vacancies. So I think that reflects last year that we're so much closer to a break even. So I think this year with I really don't expect us to have a full $3 million deficit, because I don't think I'm that good at budgeting, but there will likely be a deficit. It just won't be that bad. It'll be to the good of that in some way. But I can definitely bring that back, some analysis of fund balance.
And then just in general, I don't know, how do you guys feel? Are you comfortable with the calendar? Because if we don't approve the budget on the 28th, we don't have a whole lot of time to put out an open meeting law special meeting.
Yeah, and so
I'm a little
I
nervous about that
contacted
part.
the Department of Taxation specifically about this, because as Renee and I and Mr. Stokes were reviewing it is a very tight turnaround. But if we don't have to give the big notice that we have to give, and it's 2 notices over a period of time, is for the budget hearing itself. Whatever happens at the budget hearing, after that, it just becomes regular notice again. So even if the budget wasn't approved at that meeting, if we would have to turn around and do a new meeting, we could get notice in the paper the next day for a special meeting to occur that following week. And then we would just have a special meeting to bring that final budget through, and we would still be okay. But it would it would happen really quickly, but we would be good.
And do you guys feel comfortable with that? Because if something happens at that meeting and you're changing something, that means that the next meeting would have to be approved. So that's my only, it just feels like we're backed up against the wall. So if I'm the only one feeling that way, then I'm good. I won't ask you to change that date. But if there's any other concerns with anybody else.
I guess my question is, are you proposing that we do that even earlier I don't think we're going to have any more information to make it easier. I think that's kind of what we're up against.
If you guys feel comfortable, I just don't know if we have cuts, if it's staffing or whatever, that gives you enough time to prepare and get it out to the community.
I'm guessing in those meetings in April and even early May, you'll probably be on the agenda again, maybe give us updates constantly.
Correct. Yeah, and what I was going to say too is that so if you didn't have it on the 28th, if we held to that third, or actually it'd be the 4th Wednesday in May, it'd be the 22nd. We could certainly do that, but it's also something at this point that you don't have to decide. So I think it's something to keep in mind for sure, and then we'll bring that back as consideration. But at this point, you don't have to decide that date.
To Stacy's point, though, I think that so far we have kind of the projection for how much the technology roll-ups are projected to be. But I think at some point when we're making these decisions, I certainly don't want to have a last-minute choice of these things. And so I don't know if staff could start to look at some of the ways we could, move our staffing around, look at our budgets, look at the technology. Look at some painless solutions, or as much as painless as possible solutions for us to start to consider, as opposed to at the last minute we're making some really tough decisions kind of on the fly. That makes me a little uncomfortable.
Mr. Stokes, do you want to address that?
Sure, thanks. We have, as Mr. Fueling has mentioned, met multiple times on this particular topic. It seems really unfair that in a time of very great growth in our state that we're talking about this. So you ought to get just mad as heck. And anybody watching, call your legislator. We need to fund our industry in a better way. But we have talked about a number of solutions, which any way you slice it, it's a cut. And we have a variety of of ways to get to a point. And so one of the questions that Mr. Fueling asked, what is your comfort with the bottom line? Obviously, in our last year's budget, we had a deficit that was scheduled. What is that number for you? That's something that we ask you to think about. Obviously, you are going to be questioned by a variety of individuals. We do have a little bit of a cushion, but that cushion won't last forever if we keep spending it the way, this is indicating. I would also say that in the last legislative sessions, there has always been some increase. It has not traditionally been as high as the inflation rate. And so we've never ever quite caught up, but at least in the biennium, the numbers are a little bit higher. So we're budgeting a flat number. We hope that that number will increase, at least in this year and then hopefully in the next, but that's yet to be seen. So that's why we're taking this very conservative stance. We will be prepared at the next meeting to bring to you one or several budgets, depending on your comfort. We were also hoping that based on what you folks give us tonight, that will allow us to take steps from our position to talk with people and at least give them a heads up if we figure that that's the only way that we have to get to a particular number. We have been looking at anybody that is funded on grant programs and, just trying to be very conservative with everybody and saying, look, this is not going to be funded next year. You may want to consider, thinking about what this could mean for you, because in a lot of those grant-funded positions, our staff knows that if that funding goes away, then they will have a job based on their seniority in our school district, but it may not be the job that they've had for the last several years. So all of those things are part of this puzzle that we're trying to put together. We believe, though, that we can bring back information to you at least by our next meeting. Gives you one more meeting to talk about the tentative budget in the April 9th meeting. That gives us an opportunity to submit that budget to the Department of Taxation, and then as more information is known throughout the session, we can bring that information back. We can modify what we can up through that last meeting in May, and then we'll have to take and can even take staffing decisions for whatever happens when the legislature ends. We realize that's a little bit later than what we usually do with letters of intent and also with just the hiring process in general. But there's still an opportunity to move a little bit, to adjust a little bit once the legislative session has ended. So it's kind of tough right now. We have to position the district in a way that we're not being at risk financially. But at the same time, we want to act in good faith with all of our people and with all of our programs and with all of our activities so that we're still kind of like what we did in the Great Recession. We do as much as we can with what we have to work for and hope that our leaders provide us with more cash.
I think one of the things that might be helpful for me is to look at if we went forward and had the same projection we had last year. So like if we kept that same deficit number, what would that look like? And how long would we be able to sustain that? I think that's a good place to start and kind of gauge that. I think that's one of the pieces of information I'd like to see, because we don't want to decimate the district instructionally or staff-wise. I think that we have to find a way to kind of balance it. And I think that as much information as we could get of the different scenarios, I know I would appreciate that myself.
No, I was just going to say, didn't you say, AJ, at the current budget level, deficit would be 2 years before we'd be down in the area? where we could be getting looked at by the state?
Right, so if that's the 4.7 million, it'd be 2 years. I mean, 3 million makes it a little better. It's not that much further behind at that point. You're looking at 3.5, 4 years, you'd reach that level where the state would be looking at you. I can, when I come back with some of those fund balance numbers and based on some of the projections, I can kind of plot that out and see what that looks like.
I mean, that's kind of my thought is, I'd hate to, if the 4.7 winds up being accurate and we're talking about can't sustain more than 2 years, I'd like to see us at least get 3 years down the road so we have another legislative session. I agree, we can't decimate either one, but we got to stretch it out as far as we can. We're going to have to make some hard decisions. Yeah, so that's all for now.
And remember, all of this is, we really have so many unknowns right now. So, I mean, we're being conscious and being proactive, but at the same time, I don't want to scare the district staff thinking that we're going to be eliminating a bunch of positions and people looking for other jobs too. So I just want to make that basis that we know that we're going to probably have a reduction, but I don't think at this point we should be, I mean, our staff has looked at all kinds of situations and have been for the last 6 months that I know of. But I'm just saying, let's not get hysterical and have people thinking that we're going to cut a bunch of programs and a bunch of jobs and so that people start leaving. So let's kind of take it slow. This is kind of more just to have some information and get feedback for you guys so that AJ knows what to bring back. So, but I want to make clear, we're not talking about, eliminating $4 million at this point because we just have too many unknowns with the legislature right now.
So to be clear, as a first place to come back, you'd be looking at, so if currently it's projected at 4.7 and we'd like to start at looking at 3, trying to reduce $1.7 million in costs as a starting point. Okay.
And really, in your honest opinion of how sustainable it is or how feasible that is, because we're going to need a little bit of guidance from you and Rich on that as well.
Well, and what I was gonna say this earlier and I forgot, but one of the fundamental problems we have is that when you look at this per pupil number, there's nothing more important than this per pupil number. That's it. And when you go back to fiscal 14, that year there was an increase of 1.5% statewide. Then it was 0.6, then it was 1.1, then it was 2.1, then it was 1.2. The governor's budget for next year is 1.4, the year after that is 1.1. There's only been 1 year where that was more than the rate of inflation, right? So in the long run, sustainability kind of look, that's really troubling that we're not seeing more than that. So yeah, I understand, I think what you're asking for.
Every school district right now is going through the same thing, so it's not like it's just us too.
Is there anything beyond that you would like to see? Is that kind of the starting point, or is there another level you'd like to see at this point? You still do have some time, but if the board generally is comfortable with that, that's what I can bring.
Dawn?
I think the 3 million, I agree with. I wouldn't want to go more than that.
Okay.
Cut more than that.
Okay. Okay.
Any input from the public? Seeing none? If that's all, we will move on to number 9. Thank you, AJ. And staff. We appreciate all the effort everybody's doing right now. 2019 Nevada Legislative Update Report on Items of Interest Relating to Education for Discussion Only. Laurel Crossman and Richard Stokes.
Madam President, members of the board, as we were getting ready to put this agenda together, And now that the legislators have been meeting for just a little over a month, we thought it would be maybe good to talk about some of the salient points, especially as they apply in proposed law to education. And I know that Trustee Crossman represents the board in a legislative capacity as she works within NASB. And so we've put together a few items that have come to the forefront, and we don't anticipate going through every bill, but maybe just a few of the highlights to give you an idea of some of the things that are going on. So I'll turn the time over to Mrs. Crossman.
So I've given you a copy of the, so far, this summary that NASB has put together of the bill summary. And our public policy advisor informed us that this is a rather small amount of bills at this point in the session. And she expects it to possibly double in the next week or so, the number of bills that drop. So there could be that. The main bills, I think, that pertain to school boards are AB 57, and also same type, it's almost an identical bill for SB 105, and that has to deal with appointed school boards. They're looking to appoint 4 members of a school board from city councils, the governor, county commissions, and people from the most populous cities. NASB has traditionally opposed this because our position is that elected officials, the public usually gets it right. If there's a problem with a board member, they take care of that. One of the concessions, or one of last session, the training requirement, or was it 2 sessions ago, the training requirement came into place. And so that's one of the things that is still being discussed is that, and possibly penalties for failure to obtain training. One of the other things is that you should be aware is that there's no precedent nationwide for fully appointed school boards in the U.S. No school boards are fully appointed. The concern with having some, and particularly a majority, 4 of them appointed, is that then you could have political, it could be a politicalization of the school boards. That's a concern that NASB will continue to oppose with support from all of the districts. Couple ideas that they're floating around is possibly allowing school boards to remove members for cause with due process constraints. That's just in the early stages of trying to figure out. And there's quite a few ideas going around on that. So that's something that we'll continue to monitor and see where that goes. And the other big one is the funding formula. And there's several areas that we just don't know, but there's a lot of negotiations going on that. AJ's been involved with it. And I know that NASB's advocating for the CFOs of all of the school districts to be included in those negotiations as they go forward. Do you want to cover bills, or do you want me to cover some more?
There are some bills that are of interest, but it should also be said that we're early in the session, and some of these bills won't even make it out of committee. And, or if they do, they might make it out of committee with a number of changes or adaptations. So a couple that I thought were of interest. One is AB 78, and it's actually a bill that gives the state charter school authority much more responsibility. It recognizes them to a higher degree. And you've probably heard, because I think it's been at least 2 sessions ago, when the Achievements Charter, or the Achievement School District was actually implemented. And what that Achievement School District did is it was aimed at a state employee who would oversee then schools that were considered low performing or in need of a turnaround of some kind. Well, that system has never really gotten off the ground, and that's probably due to a lot of reasons. But what it meant to school districts is if you had one of those schools in your district, you didn't want some outside agency coming in and taking that school over. So it was really a negative in my mind for most of the state. And in this particular bill, one of the additional responsibilities given to the State Public Charter School Authority would be that they would assimilate that Achievement School District under their umbrella. And so those schools, instead of being taken over by the Achievement School District, they would actually be absorbed into other charter schools or under the charter authority. So in essence, that Achievement School District, based on current language, that thing could go away, which is actually a good thing. But there's still this outside potential that a school within a school district could be absorbed as a charter school. So we'll wait and watch that with some interest and see what happens. Another bill that I think is of interest is AB 168. And it has a variety of important changes for school districts, but one concept is being introduced here that is already in place in some other states, and it's referred to as restorative justice. Currently, there are certain things, especially as it might apply to students who cause battery on staff members. Those students are automatically suspended for a long period of time, up to 1 year or longer, depending on how the battery occurs. In this particular bill, the language exists so that the student who commits the battery against a staff member would have to go through this process of restorative justice first, which means instead of being expelled or suspended, there is a process. I'll just read kind of the definition. Restorative justice emphasizes the need to repair the harm done to victims through a process of mediation, negotiation, victim empowerment, and reparation. So it's a little uncertain. It's feared that that takes the bite out of these kinds of crimes against staff, and it may not be something that is well received by the districts, at least at this point. So there's still more to be known about that, and again, these things could be changed over time. Yep.
Something like that, I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like to me that an approach like that could have an additional cost to school districts. I mean, all of a sudden I see a department, handling something like that. So I'm not sure once it gets farther along, if it goes farther, when they'll start talking about potential fiscal impacts.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Cassiopolo. In a lot of these bills, there are not any indication of how they'll be paid for.
That's where I was going to lead with next, is that you'll notice in the paperwork I gave you from NASB that there's some opposition to bills that look like they're good things. But the main reason for the opposition is that they're unfunded mandates. So AB 145, which would require a school resource officer or a police officer in every high school or middle school or junior high, is something that we support for safety. However, there's no funding provided for that. Some of the districts, like we have entered into, have contracts with their local sheriff's department to share the cost of that, but there's concerns that they won't have enough funding to supply that many officers. There's also concerns in some of the more rural districts that there just might not be the personnel to fulfill each of that and the logistics of that. So the opposition is one for funding and also for the flexibility for individual schools. Same thing with AB 191, school librarians. It adds additional certifications to who can serve as a librarian, requires them in each school. Some schools don't need a librarian at every site. And so and then again, there's no funding for that. Also, AB 180 has some good things in it. It wants to require busing of foster students to their school of origin if that's determined to be in the best interest of the child. It also wants to integrate special ed students on busing. It's kind of a busing bill, but the opposition to that is the lack of funding, and then also the concern with the special education integration, just that there's awareness of the logistics, because not an entire fleet of school buses isn't equipped to transport all students. That may not be the safest way to do it. So hopefully that's not mandated. Another one that they're working on with some amendments to change the unfunded mandate of it is AB 205. And this is a bill proposed to manage pest and weed control on school properties. It's requiring the appointment of a chief integrated pest management and coordinators. They did make some amendments where they're proposing to have that be someone who's already employed by the district. But there's a requirement to have 10% of the staff trained and receive certification. The amendment is hoping to have that done by a nonprofit. That's a little concerning. What's also concerning to me with the bill as it's proposed is that there's requirements for notification to parents and everyone under the sun anytime there's going to be any of pest control applications, which seems to put an additional burden on school staff. Talking to Mark, he explained that we usually outsource that to a professional company anyway, so it would be forcing smaller districts that contracted out to add all this extra level of paperwork.
On AB 180, so the law already has provisions for providing transportation for children in foster care. It's a shared, in the last session, I worked on crafting this bill with a group of individuals. So currently, it's a shared responsibility between the school districts and child welfare. And so reading through this, what this would do is allow child welfare to make the best interest determination, not the schools. But then also, so we'd have child welfare making a decision, but that decision would also cost the school district money instead of it being a joint decision between the schools and child welfare, and then also a joint expenditure. It's kind of like when we have a foster child or a child experiencing homelessness who moves to Lyon County. So the two districts will work out an agreement where maybe Carson will provide transportation to the school and Lyon County will provide the transportation back. So it's a shared cost. And so I think that if the way this reads, it would make child welfare the decider, which they don't necessarily know educationally what's in the best interest of the children by themselves, but they would also not have any fiduciary responsibility in the matter. So I think that that's something to advocate for on behalf of the school districts.
Okay, thank you. That's additional information that we didn't have on the legislative committee.
So, Madam President, members of the board, we really don't anticipate coming before you every week to make an update, but if you have any items that you learn about or hear about, have questions about, we would certainly do our best to bring those back to you. And we expect too that in the very near future, there will be changes not only to these bills, but also to those that we haven't even seen yet. So it's always interesting and a little entertaining sometimes. And we appreciate this opportunity to share this information with you.
Thank you, you guys. And also just to let you know that both Laurel and I get updates from our policy specialists through NASB on certain committees and stuff. So if there's something that interests you and you want more information, feel free to contact us and we can forward those reports to you too. So it's early, it'll be fun. We'll go from there. Thank you guys for updating us.
Just a couple more I'd like to update you on. SB 188 and SB 227. Both of those bills are requiring extensive lists of expenditures from school districts posted on the websites. SB 188 does say that they should use the preceding year per pupil amount. SB 227 is a little concerning to me in that it's requiring the Department of Education to prescribe a template for what the expenditures of the average school should be, how much personnel you should have, how much you should spend on materials. To me, that seems like that's more of a local decision that should be left to the individual sites. Those are some things to keep in mind to watch. It kind of gives you an idea of where, what the temperature is, I guess, in some of the bills that are being dropped out there. So just if you've got any time to go down and talk when we rally, let us know.
Thank you much. Appreciate it. Moving on to number 10, approval of the consent agenda for possible action. Motion by Mike, second by Don. Any other discussion on the motion? Any public discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to number 11, informational items. As you know, kindergarten registration is open. There's no school, we get a 4-day break. Bond Oversight Committee meets at Pioneer. And we've already covered the other events there. Any questions about those informational? Seeing none, moving on to number 12, requests for future agenda items. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, I move to adjournment. Thank you and have a good night. We'll see you in 2 weeks.